First things first, the definition of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny is the belief the U.S. is destined to go from coast to coast. It is the destiny of the United States. It is this feeling of this era as this land is there to push further west, to acquire territory and to move there. One of the questions we're going to ask in this class, in fact, is going to be, when did that start? Was it always the case? Was it a change during this time period? Was it after the Louisiana Purchase? When did Manifest Destiny first come about? That continuity and change question we've talked about. All right, so the Treaty of Paris in 1783, this is what ended the American Revolution. So again, as you shade, do what I said and outline the different things. Go through, outline all this, and then you want to shade the text that describes this part so you know what goes with that part of the map. The British, it says they recognized the sovereignty. It maybe took a little while. Remember the War of 1812, they still had some forts out further west. But in general, this is what recognizes the United States as independent. It says they get generous boundaries. I mean, they went all the way to the Mississippi River. They get south of the Great Lakes. And again, there's going to be some disputed territory at different times in here too, but this is a big deal for the United States all the way down to Florida, which at the time controlled by Spain. But stay tuned for that, and I'm going to actually turn on my laser pointer. There we go. All right, next up, and again, you can pause at any point if I go too quick, but I would encourage you just outline, and then you can go back in and shade before you turn it in. 1803 is the Louisiana Purchase. All of this is review for us, which is why I'm going a little faster for this part. Again, the story is it's not a story, it's what happened. The history is Thomas Jefferson sent some diplomats to buy the port of New Orleans, and what ends up happening is he is given the entire Louisiana territory for $15 million, not that much more than he had authorized the purchasing of just New Orleans for. So virtually doubles the size of the United States with just that one purchase. And of course, the complicated parts of strict constructionism versus loose constructionism. Did he technically even have constitutional authority to do that? But he does it, and it really is a turning point in U.S. history as this happens, and we end up with technological advances, railroads, telegraph lines coming in the years after that really make this a turning point. Okay, then we have the Convention of 1818. All right, so I want to point a few things out. That yellow there, you see it's white up above or in present-day Canada. It's white in this point. The U.S. claimed that was part of the Louisiana Purchase, and Britain was like, no, that's ours. And then you see another white part there just above the Louisiana Territory. I will go here with it, right here, right? And what that was disputed between Britain and the United States as well. Whose territory is that? So the Convention of 1818 says the following. The part above, and I don't care if you shade the squiggly line part, that territory above is Canada. It's British, so I do not care. You can shade it, you cannot shade it. It's not a part of the U.S., so I don't care if you do. But the gray part you should shade. This becomes part of the United States. So again, mostly I'm only concerned about those parts that become United States. But if you want to differentiate those parts to say there were conflicting claims, but it ends up being the northern part above the 49th parallel, part of British territory in British Canada, and the part below the 49th parallel comes part of the United States. And so that part is territory ceded by the United States to Great Britain. And so, again, this is the use of diplomacy to settle these boundaries. And we're going to see that happen a few different times here as there are conflicting claims in these parts. Between the United States, we have France involved, we have Spain involved, right? So we have several different things. The Adams-Onis Treaty in 1819 sets up a border here on the west, and this is important to note. Spain controls much of what is present day California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Utah. That is Spanish territory, so the boundary is shown there in 1819, and then you see those two parts they get, part of present-day Florida, and then some of the other states in the South, Alabama, Mississippi, and present-day Louisiana are given to the United States. they also agree to give up their claims in the Oregon Territory. So we're in the Oregon Territory here. With this whole area was known as the Oregon Territory. The Oregon Territory had claims of Britain, Spain, the United States. And so Spain says, we're good. And so now it's just something to be figured out between Britain and the United States again. All right, 1842. All right, so we have the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, and this sets the boundary of Maine. This sets the boundary of Lake Superior. So this, what's in pink here, and again, I don't care what color you use, this becomes part of the United States. And we'll talk about, well, actually, there's a video linked here that we'll watch in class. We're going to watch and focus on a few of these as we go. All right, so that is 1842, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. Here's a big one, 1845. We have the annexation of Texas. We will get into, we'll watch some videos on this too. Ultimately, what ends up happening, somewhat with U.S. support, and this is where things get a little sneaky, Texas declares their independence. And eventually, in 1845, Texas joins the United States. But at first, they were actually an independent republic, basically, because the United States did not want to tick off Mexico. I know. I just said that was a boundary with Spanish-controlled territory. Here's the deal. In between then, Mexico gets their independence, okay? So that's kind of important to note. They give that boundary line now becomes with Mexico instead of with Spain. Sorry, I'm just like in class, I'm now trying to multitask. So that's something important to keep in mind. This independence that Mexico ends up getting is, it sort of sets up a lesser power in terms of established power, and that's what I mean by that, with the United States. And so now maybe there's some opportunity here. Ultimately, in the end, the United States in 1845 ends up getting Texas, and out of that, we'll see a little bit even further push westward into some other territories. All right. We have ultimately that redrawing of that boundary there, creating a boundary, or creating what is present day Texas. Obviously, you know what the modern day boundaries are of Texas, but they're not exactly what they are shown as there, of course. All right. Then, and you've read about this, but the slogan here, as we're going to negotiate with Oregon, is 54-40 or fight. It is the idea of that is going to be where we are going to have the boundary all the way up at the 54th parallel. And so that is kind of a good negotiating play, right? You're going to give us all that. That's going to be the northern boundary, or we're going to fight. Well, guess what? It ends up being settled actually at the 49th parallel. Good negotiating tactic. Ask for the moon, and then when you get the 49th parallel anyway, everybody's kind of happy. And it makes sense. We all like straight lines, right? That they decide, guys, we've already negotiated over this boundary line. Let's just stick with that boundary line. But know that if you see anything about 54-40 or fight, that this is about manifest destiny, and this is about that push west, the acquiring of territory in North America by the United States. And again, this is north of that. Once again, the striped lines north of the 49th parallel is going to be British Canada, just like the squiggly lines here are the same thing. Okay, the Mexican cession. What ends up happening here is the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and we will once again watch a few videos, do a little more in class specifically about a few of these things, about Texas, about Oregon, about the Mexican-American War, but it is in 1848 that the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gives the southwestern United States, gives what will be the future southwestern United States to the United States officially. And I want to point that date out to you, 1848. The San Francisco football team called the 49ers, they have gold helmets. Why? The gold rush of 1849. Had that been Mexican territory, what might have changed had the gold rush happened and there have been large numbers of Mexican settlers there. So one of the things we'll look at is, why did so many Americans live in this territory and not many Mexicans did at the time, at least comparatively speaking. And that controversy, the controversy it creates as, shocker, the Americans who move there start causing some trouble and pushing for war for that to become part of the United States. And then our last thing is the 1853 Gadsden Purchase. The biggest reason this is set there is that leading up to the Civil War, there were two camps. One is Transcontinental Railroad should go through the north. The other is, wait a minute, we can have a southern route of the Transcontinental Railroad. Remember, the South generally didn't love these infrastructure investments. Let's go back to the American system, right? A Transcontinental Railroad. But if we do a southern route, maybe then, right? So maybe we do this southern route. Maybe we do both, whatever the case may be. And we'll get into that as we get closer to the Civil War. But that is why that land was purchased, because it would have been good to have that line for a southern route of the Transcontinental Railroad, and that is in 1853. The Civil War happens, so the Transcontinental Railroad, guess where it goes? The north. It's kind of what you get when you secede. You don't get the Transcontinental Railroad. So with that, that big picture is these notes. We'll do like some of the details getting filled in a more traditional notes